think their squad definitely needs some rejuvenation going into the January transfer window. Can you tell us about any potential rumours that are flying around? You know, are there any names that they're looking at potentially going into that period?
Yeah, I mean, you've already mentioned central midfield. Calvin Phillips is a top target for Newcastle. I mean, we've been reporting on him at Football Insider for a couple of months. That would be more likely to be a loan deal. I mean, Newcastle, one thing that's really important to emphasise, they're very tight with financial fair play restrictions. They don't have a huge budget to play with. They can't just go and buy player X for 60 million or 75 million. That won't be happening. So they're going to have to box quite clever in the January window and expect them to bring in lots of players. I mean, I've been told that there could easily be 3 signings in January, but loan deals are more likely than permanent deals. And they could also use their Saudi links to bring players in from the 4 clubs that they own in Saudi Arabia. So Newcastle have been kind of accelerating their plans. They've been changed a little bit because of the Pope injury. He's out for at least 4 months. You know, will struggle to play much again this season. Yeah. So they've had to kind of turn their plans on the head a bit. And as you said, midfield is a big issue as well.
So do you think that actually the pull, now that they don't have Champions League, is the pull for those players that are in Saudi, does it have the same weight? Because I think one thing when you look at that team was that going into February, it really looked like they were going to be in Europe in some capacity. So if you were a player in the Saudi Pro League, what would your stance on that be then?
I think players will look at it, what's best for my career? Is it best for my career to be playing at an elite English club? And am I likely to get in the team? I think in terms of the finances, that could be sorted out. And obviously, PIF, the Saudi Arabia owners own both clubs. I don't think that would be an issue. But in terms of the players themselves, they'll be looking at, would I get match minutes? Then, you know, you mentioned Lewis Smiley in midfield, 17 years old. A senior player at one of those clubs in midfield would probably see himself as more likely to play than Lewis Smiley, but then less likely than Bruno Guimaraes. So it does depend on the individual position they'll be covering for. And the interesting thing is that Newcastle are looking at lots of positions as well, Lewis, not just centre midfield. They're looking at the goalkeeper, they're looking at centre back and a third striker as well. And initially, back in September, it was more of a young, unproven striker who could develop under Eddie Howe and his coaching team. But that's slightly changed now. Now they want a forward who's a bit more experienced. So that's as a result of how the season's gone. And you look at how many minutes, not so much Isaac and Wilson, because they've shared that role between them, haven't they?
Yes.
But it's more in the other positions, like Anthony Gordon, he's played 1,500 minutes. Almiron's played most of the minutes as well. So's Joelinton. So I think those positions they are looking at, and you know, from what I hear, that potential forward signing could also come in, albeit on loan as well. But the Botman one, I think Lewis has hit them really hard. Because he was brilliant last season, wasn't he? And started this season really well. So that's another position as well. I mean, Lascelles has done much better than I thought, than many Newcastle fans thought. And you know, given that the club were very happy to sell him in previous transfer windows, including particularly in January of this year, for him to play so much and actually play at a decent level and really sort of stand up to some top level centre forwards has been, a huge sort of surprise to many, but also, a reflection of that, he's a decent centre back.
Absolutely, and he's someone that can be relied upon, isn't he? He's someone that steps in and does do a job. And I thought he did okay last night. I didn't think they played badly. I thought they were quite unfortunate, really. And again, I think it wasn't to do with a lack of quality. I think it was just they were, and I know we've said about exhausted, but I think their squad did look so tired. They'd given everything in that game against Spurs. Didn't work out tonight. They knew the pressure. Sorry, last night they knew the pressure, and of course they capitulated.
Do you remember though in Jurgen Klopp's first season at Liverpool when all those Liverpool players kept breaking down with hamstring injuries one after another, and that's because they were being overtrained in a much more demanding and intense style that their bodies weren't used to, and they kept breaking down one after the other. And it started happening again in his second season, and then he completely changed the training as a result of that. Klopp and his coaching team, whereby they held off a bit, they had less demanding sessions, or the demanding sessions were well between the games, and it meant that the training loads reduced and the injuries reduced as well. And then you look at how many injuries Liverpool have generally had over the last 6 years, 5-6 years, they're much less. And you know, all teams do have injuries, but Liverpool don't generally have 10, 12 at once, do they?
No.
I mean, you could say Mohamed Salah's a complete one-off, but I don't think he is at Liverpool. I think there's quite a lot of them that play most games, play 80% of the minutes.
Yeah.
Arnold, Robertson normally, Van Dijk, obviously the goalkeeper, Trent, you know, Henderson always did. You know, a lot for being these players didn't get that many sort of muscle injuries. So I think Newcastle have to look at themselves as well. You know, have they been doing too much training?
Yeah. And then look at off the pitch rather than just on-field results as well. I think the one question, Wayne, I've got going forwards, you know, you mentioned about the Chelsea game next week in the Carabao Cup quarter-final away from home at Stamford Bridge. If they get a result in that, you know, what's going to be a success now for Hull this season? They've crashed out of Europe. They're still in this competition. If they win that, do you think that, you know, is that something to cheer about for Newcastle?
I think for Newcastle, a trophy would be absolutely incredible, astonishing, game changer, whatever adjective you choose, because they haven't won one, have they, for 50 years? They've come so close. They've lost 5 cup finals. I think that would be as important as finishing top 4. I think the top 4 obviously has the Champions League and then the kudos and then the finances. That is really important. But a trophy would change everything. And also, I think it would change the club's mentality. It would change the fans' mentality. And that game next week has suddenly become really important, hasn't it, for both clubs, giving, you know, Chelsea a belly in the top 10 of the Premier League, Newcastle 7th. They're going to have a mighty battle to get 4th, and that looks pretty unrealistic. I mean, I know there might be 5 Champions League places next season, but that's not certain for English clubs. So it looks pretty uphill for Newcastle in the Premier League. So that game's huge. And for Chelsea, I mean, which club's it bigger for? Is
the question. To be honest, I think in terms of pressure, I think there is more pressure on Chelsea to get a result because of Pochettino. I think fans are expecting more. And in one sense, I think actually Newcastle have a free hit, because if they go out, well, it's another competition they lose. But I do think there is going to be an expectation of let's go and get a result. Chelsea have not been good this season at all. They are so hit and miss every week.
I mean,
You've just watched a segment from Football Insider's brand new podcast, The Inside Track, with me, Lewis Pearce, alongside the guests on the show. Thanks very much for tuning in. Please do give the video a like, comment your thoughts on the topic, and feel free to share on your social media pages. If you want to listen to the full podcast episode, click the link in the description below. Keep your eyes peeled for plenty more content and exclusives here on The Inside Track.